Hey, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior's Spirit, where we let the inner warrior and let their inner warrior shine in their light. Sorry. Today I have the pleasure of being with Chris D.T. Gordon. He's a teacher and professional speaker, but he has an amazing journey, and I'm honored to have him on. Chris, thank you for your time today.
Daryl, thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Well, you have an amazing story because you did something extremely innocuous. You were playing with your child, swinging them, getting them ready to be in their car seat like every normal parent. You got a scratch, and unlike most of us who just need a Band-Aid, you developed a flesh-eating bacteria.
Yeah, usually that's not how it goes. Usually, like you said, you put your Band-Aid on, maybe you put some antibiotic cream. And I did that, but then I got the added bonus of, yay, almost 3 months in the hospital.
So how did you discover that it had become so severe?
Well, it was 3 days after I had scratched my hand, Daryl. I woke up and I found a lacrosse ball-sized bump on my right elbow.
Well, that's an indication that something's wrong.
Yeah, I usually don't wake up like that.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, I'll go to the urgent care clinic in New Ulm, Minnesota here and get it checked out. The doctor looked at it and said, well, it could be bursitis, which is an inflammation of the bursa sac. So just keep an eye on it and we'll see what happens. And if anything weird happens, just come back. So I kept an eye on it as the bump grew and grew and grew until my right arm was 3 times the size of my left.
Dang.
In comic book parlance, I was the Incredible Hulk in mid-transformation. But I was much less angry and smashy and much more sicky and tiredy.
Yeah. And so you're married, correct?
Yes.
So what did your wife start to say? Because I know whenever I get something, my wife is like, go to the doctor. And as men, we're like, no, it'll be fine. Put some duct tape on it and we'll go, right?
Exactly.
What was your wife's reaction?
Well, she started calling around, and she is a teacher as well. She teaches in the public school here in the high school. She got a hold of one of her colleagues whose teenage son was dropped off to watch the kids while Becky took me to the emergency room. And so as I was entering the emergency room, they checked me in because, hello, huge right arm. But as they were taking my vitals, they noticed there was another problem. I had gone septic.
Ooh.
And so for those of you who don't know, sepsis is, I guess in layman's terms, a reaction that the body has to a foreign agent in its system. And sometimes what can happen is it can send a chemical through the bloodstream to ward off said agent. However, the flip side is that chemical alone can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a ginormous right arm and poison coursing through my veins. Admittedly, not the craziest Saturday night I ever experienced, but easily top 5.
Yeah, it ranks right up there.
Yes.
This doctor, I imagine, did not say bursitis.
No. She did not know what to say, though. They ran a bunch of tests and they couldn't figure it out. In fact, they kept me overnight for observation. And in the morning, that attending doctor came up to my hospital bed and told me words I will never forget, Daryl. She said, Mr. Gordon, this is beyond us.
Wow.
We can do nothing more for you here.
Wow.
Where do you want to go?
I got chills when you said that right now, because that's not what most doctors say.
No, I was hoping for something like, well, did you eat any shellfish? Right. Something like that. But she came up with no answers. And then I answered her question by saying Mayo, as in the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Not only because it's Mayo, It's like the share of hospitals. You just say
Right.
Mayo and people know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But also because Bill and Dee, Becky's parents, lived in Rochester. So I knew that she, the kids, and Max the dog would have a place to stay for I was sure, Daryl, 2 or 3 days this would take to resolve itself, max, because of my extensive medical expertise being an online special education teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. You and Dr. Google really got together and said, I'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. We hung out with, we got together with WebMD and we had a good old time. So they took me to the literally strapped me into the inside of this small Cessna airplane. I was this close to kissing the side of the cabin wall.
Wow.
20 minutes as they flew me to Rochester, because that was I guess that was the safest way they could secure me in there.
Here's something else, though, Chris, that the audience may not know. And I'm familiar with the Mayo Clinic because I'm from Minnesota area and having dealt with it down here in Arizona, my wife going there. It's an elite hospital that Saudi Arabian princes have flown into to be treated in. It's not just your average, hey, local hospital. This is an elite hospital. And the fact that you were even in an area to go to an elite hospital isn't in of itself a miracle, because most of us don't have that, kind of access. So your foresight to say Mayo Clinic really was, intuitive as well.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I definitely, attribute that decision to saving my life. Not that other places, couldn't, but it was, like I said, a 20-minute plane ride away.
Yeah.
Which was incredibly fortuitous, because once they were able to get me to St. Mary's Hospital, which is the flagship hospital in the Mayo Clinic system in Rochester, that's where they diagnosed me with necrotizing fasciitis, or flesh-eating bacteria.
And what test did they run that the other doctors couldn't? Because that seems like a test that would be like definitive. Like, we know we need to run this test to get that result.
Well, I think it was just a basis of knowing what to look for. They had another gentleman who had NF the week before. He had lost his arm and still died. So this is not their first rodeo with NF. They knew what they were looking for. And when I came in, they knew exactly what it was.
And so how does a scratch, an innocuous swinging of the arm, turn into a flesh-eating bacteria?
Well, it happened because I had come in contact with group A Streptococcus pyogenes. So there was strep in the area, regular strep, but it had gotten into my system. And where someone like me would usually get a scratch and no big deal, it just happened to be this weird concoction. And I happened to be, as my plastic surgeon said later on, the first marathon runner he had ever met who had caught an NF. Wow. Because usually people who are, have a predisposition for catching flesh-eating bacteria include people with type 2 diabetes, other health issues, and because their immune systems are weakened, and they just have that, that predisposition. I didn't. The week before my hospitalization, I had run a 5K. Actually, it was called a Pi Day race. It was on March 14th. So my math geeks know that's 3:14.
Yes.
And so I had run that in under 19 minutes, 20. I actually ran it in 19 minutes, 29 seconds.
Wow.
So I wasn't a couch potato by any means when I got sick. So that's why it was all the more shocking that I did catch it. But yes, thankfully they knew what they were looking for. And as soon as they diagnosed it, they got me into my first of 50, as it turned out, 15 surgeries.
Wow. So what is the treatment for a flesh-eating bacteria that allows you to keep your arm and your life?
Well, they first had to debride the area which basically is a fancy word of saying fillet me. They
Mm.
took all the infected skin and tissue off my arm, shoulder, chest, and back.
Oh, geez.
And not only did they have to do that, they also had to clear the area of all of the NF, all the flesh-eating bacteria. When they had done that, they first realized two things. First of all, that my right arm was going to have to be amputated. The infection had gone so far into my right forearm that they thought that there was no way it was going to survive. However, that wasn't as big as an issue as the fact that I, at one time, had a 30% chance of survival. When I present to high school and middle school audiences, I like to use the analogy of the marble bag.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have 3 white marbles and 7 black marbles to show how close I had come to not being here. So they went through the first surgery, they saw what was going on, and they told Becky the situation. At that time, my brother, who also lives in Michigan, he was called by Becky as soon as she found out. He found the first flight out of Grand Rapids, Michigan to the cities, flew over Lake Michigan and took a shuttle down to Rochester and stayed with Becky and my in-laws and the kids, sometimes even sleeping in the hospital just so he could get the latest updates on my condition. Well, the second surgery comes around and they are all geared up for taking my arm. However, the occupational therapist who was in attendance saw that it still had hand function. So what they then elected to do was remove a 15-inch by 4-inch flap of skin from my left thigh and place it on my right hand and forearm. You can see the division here between the area from the leg and the skin grafts here.
Yep.
And so since this is my thigh on my hand, I call this my thand. Copyright pending.
Yes.
So this all came from my thigh because it needed a part of an artery to carry the blood, through my arm to the hand. But then now this is where my story becomes a little bit like the story when you give a mouse a cookie.
Yeah.
You know how when you solve one problem, another problem happens.
Yes.
Well, my arm was saved, but now I have a giant hole in my leg. And as I said before, I'm a runner and a former soccer player. So I have pretty big thighs. They couldn't close the wound naturally. So what they elected to do, and they did, they took out my vastus lateralis, which is the outermost quadricep muscle in your thigh.
Wow.
So they took that out and then they installed a shoestring type contraption on the inside of the wound and then knobs on either side of the wound so they could tighten it over time.
Wow.
So they installed that and then they started performing skin graft harvesting surgeries where they would take a skin graft harvester, imagining a cheese slicer that just hulked out. This thing is huge like that, up and down my back and my thighs, leaving strips that still exist today. They put those they lay down a material called Integra all over the infected areas that were now clear of that infected skin. And then they would put the skin grafts on there. Now, some of the skin graft surgeries were after I'd woken up, but I was in a coma for 5 straight days.
Wow.
And so many of those skin graft surgeries started when I was in that coma.
So you didn't even get, and what you're describing is what happens a lot with burn victims. So I'm familiar with that same process that you're talking about, but you didn't even have a say in your treatment.
No,
so
because
your wife had to say no to the amputation and yes to all this other invasive stuff.
Mhm.
That's an incredibly strong woman that you're
Right,
married to.
my wife is my superhero. Is I wouldn't be here talking to you without her. Not only for that decision you talked about, but I'll get to the reason why I, you know, I view her so highly. And it's not that our relationship is me, bowing to her every time I see her, but she is the reason why I'm a speaker.
Yeah. Well, I'm married to an equally strong woman, so I get what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
So what is the span of time between surgery 1 and 15?
I would say probably 4 weeks, because
Wow.
the first week I was in a coma, practically the first whole week, and then they had to still attach skin grafts, and then for the dressing changes for my wounds, because not only were the skin grafts part of the surgeries, but I had numerous open wounds that they had to dress change every day. And for the first one or two, I was put under because of how long it would take. Eventually, over time, the nurses and I worked it out that we could get it done in 20 minutes, but it took some practice.
Well, most surgeons don't work on Sunday. So if you take out the Sundays of that 4-week period, you're having a surgery about every day.
I got used to being put under
Wow.
and being able to sneak in some ice chips whenever I could.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. So when did they determine you were out of the woods and the rest of the surgeries were not maintenance, but you know what
Mhm.
to help the healing of that? When did they know that your flesh eating part is out of the woods, your arm is saved, and now we're just patching it back together?
It was when I had come out, when I had awakened from my coma, that I realized, okay, he's starting on the road. And so that's, I think, at least that's when I count as the start of my recovery, is waking up and starting to take stock of what has gone on, and being able to metaphorically move forward, if not physically,
Right.
because I was going to be stuck in that bed for a couple of weeks.
So I'm a transformational life coach, mindset coach. And so I understand, and my background's in psychology. So I understand the power of the brain. But I also understand human nature. Why me? What the fuck me? How me? All that. How long did you take in that part before you got to the okay, now I'm going to fix it part?
Well, it took a couple of days. When I woke, Jeff, my brother, who was in the hospital at the time, called Becky and my father-in-law, Bill. They came to the hospital. They visited with me, gave me brief details about what had gone on. And then they left so I can get some sleep. However, that didn't really happen. I dozed in and out that first night, but basically I was starting to come to terms with my new normal, with my new body, as I say. And I was asking myself lots of questions, but coming up with no answers. I was asking myself, what was I going to be able to do when I fully heal? If I fully heal, what were my relationships going to be like with Becky and the kids, my other family members and friends, my colleagues? How was I going to handle other stresses? How was I going to be able to do my job? How were we going to afford this? All those questions and more were circling my brain, and I had no answers for them. And I could start to feel myself slowly going down a downward spiral, because I didn't know what to do. I felt rudderless.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a couple days of going through, wake up moments. Like, for example, one was in my online school, and I had been teaching since 2012 for the online school. So I was in my 4th year when I was in the hospital. I had become the MC for the talent show. And we were planning on having a talent show the Friday after I went into the hospital up in Chaska, which is one of the suburbs of the Twin Cities, southwest corner of Minneapolis. So I was thinking, well, I'm up now. Let's go. What are we doing? Let's get up to Chaska. And everyone's looking at me like I had my leg attached to my arm, thinking, you are going nowhere.
Yeah.
You almost died. You just woke up from a coma. What are you thinking? You're going to go up the chest? I can do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so I was completing my case until I look up at the clock and I see it's 5 o'clock. Oh, talent show starting. And I throw up. So at that point, I realized I wasn't going to the talent show. But it was a first couple of days of coming to terms with what was going on. But then Becky and I had a conversation. And it was more of her just talking and me listening. So I guess it doesn't quite count as a conversation, but it was very pivotal, where she started telling me about all the wonderful things people were doing for us. For example, our neighbors were snow blowing our driveway and shoveling our walkways. I mean, yes, it was April or late March, but Minnesota, that's winter round 2. Yes. Our law enforcement was keeping an eye on our house, because when you live in a small town, the phrase flesh-eating bacteria spreads as quickly as the bacteria itself does.
Absolutely.
We had friends from my colleagues from school were coming to Rochester. Some of them lived in the area, some of them close by. They were coming to Bill and Dee's house to drop off food and play with the kids. Jeff, my brother, he had bought me an iPad so I could, binge watch things while I was recovering. A high school classmate of Becky's started a GoFundMe account that ended up more than covering my lost wages, because I ended up missing an entire school quarter. Wow. The entire, 9 weeks I was gone. She told me all of these things, Daryl. And it was almost as if I could feel that, what I call personal bacteria, all those questions that were ruminating in my head, wash away. And I was left with what I now call the attitude of gratitude, or TAG for short. And it was like a light switch. I wasn't worried about what I was, going to be able to do physically. I was now determined that all these people were stepping up the bat for us. I am not going to play the role of a victim. I'm not going to throw a pity party. I'm not going to be someone they're going to look down on and feel bad for, because that will be a slap to their face for what they have done for us.
Yeah, humanity, when it steps up for us and it humbles us to that point, we do feel an innate responsibility to give back to said humanity. That's an incredible strength and power for both you and your wife. Quick question. This was 8 years ago. How old were your children at the time?
My older son was 6, and we had twins. We have twins still. And they were 2 at the time of the start of my hospitalization. They actually turned 3 while I was in the hospital, and we actually had a birthday party for them. Becky threw a party for them here at the house, and then they had a small party for me in one of the hospital reception areas.
So it's hard enough for adults to deal with this kind of activity and trauma and displacement of our lives. What did you do, or more importantly, your wife and your family do to keep them calmer? Because this is a pretty big deal when dad's not there.
Yeah. Well, we have an amazing community here in New Ulm. As I said, Becky's a teacher, and they worked out that every Friday, a recently retired social studies teacher could come in and teach Becky's classes because she was a history teacher. So so she could bring the kids and the dog to Rochester on Thursday night and stay until Sunday. And again, since we have friends in the school system, one of our friends was Josh's kindergarten teacher. So she would send work with him on Thursday night. And Becky's mom is a retired school teacher, so she would help him with the schoolwork. We had, people just covering our bases, like I said before. And so it made things a lot easier to handle from that end. I just had to worry about recovering. I even tried to do some schoolwork. I really tried. I had my computer there and I tried to log in, but they said, no, we got it. I think the most I did was I had to talk with my long-term sub about how to play the game Minecraft. Because at the time I was using Minecraft as a teaching tool.
Nice.
And so I had to teach her how to log in and how to do, rudimentary stuff like build and mine for blocks and hunt for food and stuff. But, we were very blessed to have a strong community backing us.
So you have an amazing heart and an amazing spirit. How did you turn that switch once it was turned on? How did you turn it into tag? And how did you turn it into the fight of getting out of that bed and living your life? And what you're doing and what you're saying is very close to my heart. And I'll tell you that because when my father was 18, he was in a car accident and he was in a coma for 3 months. The doctors told him he'd never walk again. And they put a huge pin in his leg that was supposed to make the bones grow back together. It made him grow shorter. So his leg every year started to shrink. And every year he had to get a bigger lift on his shoe.
Mm-hmm.
But they told him, you'll never walk again. And my dad, he was 19 years old at the time. He said, fuck you, I'm walking. And he spent the next year in the VA hospital determined to get out of that bed and walk again. And he did. And I see that same heart and that same spirit in you, which is the only reason I share that story to yours. But what was that process of, okay, all these people are rallying around me, I need to go?
It was just the mindset of, what do I need to do to get out of here? Now, I say that with the mindset of, I'm blessed to be in this place, but this place is to help me heal. This is not my destination. So I worked with the nursing staff. I worked with the specialist. I worked with my surgeon. And every day I asked, okay, what do I need to do now? What's my next step? As soon as I was able to walk, I told them, all right, grab me, get me a walker. As soon as I was able to move from that to the cane, I did. As soon as I could move, unsupported, I did. Whatever I could do to progress to that next level. Once I was able to start moving, I had a huge cast in my arm. Mm-hmm. It went from my neck all the way and basically covered everything but my fingers. As soon as I got that thing off, grab me a pulley. I'm going to attach a pulley to the bathroom door, start working my shoulder muscles, because they and my all my muscles basically had atrophied. And so I needed to start working them out. So I would scooch myself onto the bathroom, onto the hospital floor, and start doing shoulder lifts. Once the physical or occupational therapist was able to get in there, they started giving me sponges to squeeze. And then I graduated to a tennis ball with a plastic tennis racket to work on my dexterity. Nice. And so it's always about what's that next level. That's the beauty of being a video game. Next level of difficulty. I want to find that princess who isn't in that castle. So, that's what my mindset was okay, what do I do now? Let's get going.
It does help to have an athletic attitude too, because you're used to training, if you will, and pushing yourself to that next thing. So you already had some of that mindset to help, So how did you take all of that and turn it into tag?
Well, it took me a while. I didn't start speaking professionally for a while because I first wanted to get some I won't say awards, but some backing on my message. And I wanted to do that by achieving things. So it started first with running. I wanted to get back into running. And pretty soon I found I had set or tied 4 personal running records in the 5K, the 10K, the 10 mile, and the half marathon. And then while I was doing that, I started taking Taekwondo classes with my older son. And last year, I earned my first degree black belt in Taekwondo. So it was about, I would say 3 or 4 years ago that I said, okay, I need to use my message to not just help myself. I'm at a place now where I can start really helping people out. But I did it in a different way. I started doing Beachbody, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with Beachbody. It's the training system, and you get the shakes and stuff. And my mind was, I was thinking, you know what? I can inspire people to be healthy. If this guy who looks like a discount Deadpool can do these exercises, they can. And it was good. I mean, I felt good physically, but that just turned out not to be for me. And I don't disparage anyone who does Beachbody. They were helping people get healthy and get into a strong mindset. I have a good friend who is a Beachbody coach. She is fantastic. And she's actually one of my podcast guests for her own story. But that just wasn't me. So I said, all right, I'm done with this. Why didn't I think of it before? Is get me on a stage. And so on January 1st, 2020, I decided, all right, I'm going to become a professional speaker. And February 25th of 2020, I set up my first speaking engagement at my church here in New Ulm, which is a block and a half away. And since I know the pastor, I was able to get the place for free, got in 25 people. Most of them were friends of mine. Some people I didn't know. I gave a message, and tag wasn't the center of it, but it was part of it. That went well. I figured, all right, let's do this. You could probably guess what happened 3 weeks later, Daryl.
Setbacks? Crickets?
Yes. Setbacks called COVID.
Yeah.
So all the stages were taken from me.
Yep.
But then I thought, well, you know what? I need to speak. And if I can't find a physical stage, I'm going to create a virtual one. So I started a podcast, what I call Scar Bearers. And I started gaining reps by sharing parts of my story on YouTube and then on Anchor, where you can put the audio episodes. I found, though, I could only tell my story for so many times on my own channel.
Right.
So I took a twofold approach. I first started asking other people to be guests on my podcast. And then I started asking people to be on their podcasts. And so for the next year, I started getting reps, sharing my story in other people's stages, some podcasts, some virtual summits. Meanwhile, I'm getting in front of the camera and talking to other people, gaining some confidence in my speaking ability. So when 2021 came around and stages are starting to open up, I'm able to serve. And so it took a little while for me to finally get to where I am right now, but it's really served me well. Not only is it, an achievement to say you're a professional speaker, but I'm able to help people, and that's ultimately what I want to do.
Well, it's it's been said and documented that public speaking is the number one fear that most people have. They would rather jump off a bridge than actually public speak. And many of us who do public speaking have done so through our own pain so that we can help others, because ultimately we don't survive those messes just for this is it. There's something in there that has been given to us as an opportunity to help others through their own mess. And I think we feel an obligation, to do that. And I love that you have the attitude of gratitude. It is life changing. It is a mindset life change. You were going to tell me why you love and admire your superhero, your wife, beyond the fact that she saved your life.
Yes. Well, I mean, she is my compass, and I should also say, my faith had a huge part in helping me recover. My church family stepped up big. I should also mention my father-in-law is a retired pastor, and he was actually a chaplain in the hospital. And so not only did I get to see him personally, I was part of his rotation. And so every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he would stop by and he would grab me some Subway on the way to enjoy. So I greatly have fond memories of that. But, Becky is very much the better half of me, for lack of a better term. We complement each other in many ways. She's just as big of a geek as I am, but she plays it down, closer to the chest, but closer to the vest. But she is brilliant. I have this. I'm going to share a technique I share on my stage with you, Daryl. It's called the AAA.
Okay.
It's so you can actively augment your appreciation of someone. So what you do is you first think of someone in one of your social circles and you remove them from that social circle. So you look at them without any connection to you. Then you think of all the positive ways that this person benefits the world. Could be how they do their jobs, could be how they interact with other people, whatever. Think of all the positive things that they do. Then you put them back into that social circle. And then you realize and you appreciate that you have this great person in your life. Well, I like to use Becky as an example, because not only is she my wife, my partner, and my best friend, she's also a loving mother, a loving daughter and sister, a brilliant teacher, a great historian, a well-trained athlete. Like I said, she's a big geek, and she is just a benefit to the community as a whole. So now I put her back into that social circle that we share, and she's still all of those things, but she's my wife, my partner, my best friend to boot. You are looking at arguably the luckiest guy on the planet. And yeah. She has been a huge supporter of me on this journey. She does have to call me out sometimes, because just because I survived a flesh-eating bacteria does not make me perfect.
No, no
And,
qualifier.
she has her own point of view that she's coming from, but in many ways, I would not be here if it weren't for her. And so that's why she is my superhero.
I think that's an important part of your story. The community for sure, the love of the family, the faith, but the supportive spouse who not only did what she did, but she knew you well enough to do what she did, because she didn't take the easy option of the amputation. She chose a hard path for you to save your arm and your life. So that's huge kudos and respect to your wife. As we kind of tie this down, if somebody, obviously not many people are going to go through a flesh-eating bacteria, but they are going to go through their own crap. What would you impart with them to help make that an easier journey?
Well, first, Daryl, I'm going to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you and your audience today. And I'm secondly going to go through the framework of TAG.
Good.
So first of all, no matter what you're facing, there are positive things around you. And when I think about, when I thought about what were the positive things in my life when I started down this journey, the big things came to mind, family, friends, my job, my house, my home. But then I was thinking, well, what about the small things? What about those seemingly insignificant parts of our lives that actually bring us that daily dose of joy and help us to live this thing called life? So I thought about the show Daredevil on Netflix that I was able to binge watch on that iPad my brother bought me. I thought about how the nurse's station was just a mere 10-foot walk away from my hospital room. And then I thought about the hospital pizza. Daryl, what is your opinion about hospital food?
Well, last year I had 3 neck fusion surgeries, so I spent a great deal of time in the hospital, and I was fortunate enough to get some really good food, but that's not the norm. Normally it's hospital food, and I put that in what everyone knows to be air quotes. It's usually not the best.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the pizza at the St. Mary's Hospital is phenomenal. Chef's kiss. Mwah. Maybe it's because I hadn't had pizza in a month when I finally had it, but I just remember it being great. And so today I do this all the time. I think about, I do what I call the 5 and 10. I give myself 10 seconds to point out 5 things that I appreciate. And then I think about why I appreciate them. I'm going to do it right now. I am thankful for this hand stretching thing. I am thankful for these scissors. I am thankful for this light. I am thankful for that Ninja Turtle picture. And I'm thankful for my sweater. All right. So this hand stretching thing, I sometimes find myself getting fidgety. If I'm on a long meeting or I'm, waiting for something, I use this to strengthen my hand. And I'm happy that I can do this with this hand because this is the arm that I almost lost. I'm thankful, the scissors, because since I'm an athlete, I get injured often. So I have to put KT tape on those areas. And so I can cut up those strips easily with the scissors. I am thankful for this light so you can see me. I'm thankful for that Ninja Turtle picture because I got it at a recent comic book convention, and I have always loved the Ninja Turtles. And finally, I love this sweater. I'm not sure if you're a Marvel fan, Daryl, but this is my Loki sweater, and I love it because if you've ever seen the show, it has a little Easter egg there for people who understand the joke. So I do that a lot. I take into account what are the good things in my life. So that's the T. Think of all the good things in your life. Then there's the A, acknowledge the appreciated. Earlier, I told you about the triple A, how you can actively augment your appreciation of someone. think about all the people in your life that benefit you in some way. And it doesn't have to be now. It could be years ago in your past. I tell a story to when I serve adults or professionals about, especially teachers, about my high school English teacher, Steve Nordstrom, who actually sadly passed away a little while ago. But I tell a story about how he basically saved me from getting into trouble and 4 years of embarrassment by having quiz bowl or knowledge bowl practices during lunch in his classroom. And it was torture to go into that lunchroom and sit where I knew, I felt people boring their eyes into me. I was just counting the seconds till someone's going to bump into me or take something from me. Steve saved me from all that. And so I acknowledged that, and I shared that with his wife, and actually shared the video of me talking about that to her so they could show that to the memorial service. So acknowledge the people you appreciate in your life and do it often. Let them know that you appreciate them. And then the G is give others a reason to be grateful. No matter where you are at, you can serve some value up to someone. That's the beauty of technology. You can send an email, write a text, you record a video. You have the power to do so much to help others. And when you do that, science, research has shown that when you give others a reason to be grateful, you're helping yourself as well. Mm-hmm. It gives you gratitude, positivity, and resilience that you can use to find a way out of this certain situation that you're in.
I love it. Yeah, I've used your technique in my own healing journey, and it's, as you said, scientifically proven. You can't hold gratitude and anger and woe is me in the same space. It's like the light and the dark can't hold the same space together. So the more you find, and my wife used to make me do that, go outside and find 5 things that you're grateful for. And the more you do that, the more you realize that it is the little things that create the big things for the gratitude in our life. And we do have a lot to be grateful for.
Exactly. So, I just wanted to piggyback on that, Daryl, really quick, because, many people think that, well, having things means that or that having more things is the road to happiness. No, it's not. I am not by any means wealthy or rich. I'm not rich, but I am wealthy because I see the value in the things I already own. And once you see the value in what's all around you, that helps you feel more wealthy and more positive about your situation.
Absolutely. And you are wealthy because you're still here from an innocuous swinging of your child that, almost cost you everything. So yes. Going to ask you one last question. I ask it to all my guests. And now that we have done this, you're part of my world and my tribe. And I named this podcast A Warrior Spirit for a reason. What does a warrior spirit mean to Chris D.T. Gordon?
Well, I think a warrior spirit is the ability to see success and in a no-win situation. When you are faced with something that is seemingly insurmountable, you're able to pick yourself up off the ground or the hospital bed, as it were, and find a way to come up with that solution to make it through and make it to the next level, to piggyback on what I said earlier about video games.
I love it. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure hearing your story. I'm glad that you're still with us to be able to share it. And I'm sure that a lot of people will get a lot out of it. We will drop a link to your podcast so people can tune in and hear your podcast as well.
Yeah. And, can I share my contact information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. People can find me at chrisdtgordon.com. Like I said, I like to keep it simple. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, all at Chris D.T. Gordon. The podcast is called Scar Bearers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, all those podcasty places. And you can email me at chris@chrisdtgordon.com.
Where all the cool people hang out. We'll drop all those links and or the geeky ones, the Minecrafters. We'll drop those links in the episode as well. And people, I hope they take the opportunity to get to know you, because you're an amazing man. And send our love to your wife, and may you continue to have a blessed rest of your journey.
Well, thank you, sir. You do the same, please.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.